Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about Tomb Raider, or the version of Tomb Raider that was released in 2013, the sort of reboot to the trilogy that then came out with Rise and Shadow. And yeah, so I recently played Tomb Raider 2013, and I'd never played it before. But I wanted something. I was looking for something that wasn't going to be a huge experience. Unfortunately, a lot of games now these days are very, very big. I wanted something a bit more of a tighter experience and sort of linear experience. And I've now finished the game, and I got to say I quite enjoyed it. So I want to give my thoughts on it, and if I think this is the sort of thing that's worth playing now in sort of 2024. I have played the original Tomb Raider games, like the ones that were back on at PS1 and early PC stuff, sort of the late 90s, early 2000s. I never really got into them. That I find them very hard to go back to. I've not played the recent remastered trilogy, but I was never a big fan. There were some cool ideas, but these games I knew that was very similar to like Uncharted and very much more of this sort of linear story kind of like there's tombs to raid, there are items to find and stuff, but you can kind of like just beeline through it and just enjoy the experience. So let's start with the things that I think are really good about this game. One thing this game does really well is the platforming gameplay of you traversing the land and getting from point A to point B. When the game lets you just like, hey, we need you to get from here to here, and you just, you're climbing around things, you're climbing up walls, you're using rope arrows, you're platforming essentially. And as the game opens up, you get more and more tools to traverse. That is the game at its absolute best, is when you are, like, there is combat, there are like sort of set pieces the game also does, but when it's purely, I need to figure out how I get up this mountain, and you're climbing up the mountain and you're using, like I said, rope arrows and like being able to jump onto different parts of the rock and climb. And it just flows really well. I will say there's almost like a little automatic bit of control there. You'll see sometimes in the game when you're like doing these platforming challenges or getting around, that Lara's actual character will kind of almost like automatically lock onto rails and stuff. It's not always noticeable, but it's one of those things where like if you're holding forwards, she'll like sometimes slightly move to the left and right to dodge things and move and all that. So it kind of like it's very linear in that sense. But I am somebody who loves platforming. So I really enjoy the fact that you can jump quite far with Lara in this. You can basically, swing on things, climb along things, use like bridges, all this sort of stuff to get around from point A to point B. And I think the game is at its absolute best when you're like up a radio tower, or you're in these like different crypts and things like that, and it lets you do a lot of this platforming. It's very freeform, and I enjoy that. I think the game feels good to play. Now, bear in mind, I played this on PC, so I'm playing with WASD. It probably does work better with an analog stick, but I didn't have any issues with it. So, take that as you will, but I think it's absolutely fine with keyboard and mouse. The other thing, the puzzles, mainly the tombs that you go into, they're very puzzle heavy. They were quite good as well. They're very contained set piece of like, hey, this is a puzzle, tackle this puzzle, and you gain either treasure map or something from it. I really enjoyed those as well. I thought they were a really good way of not completely disassociating the whole tomb raiding part, because this is meant to be an origin story, but having them basically give you a bit of lore. Like Lara always comments on things that's going on around her, which I quite like. To be like, oh, so the people are using this island as a shrine and things like that when you find these tombs. But these tombs are really nice set pieces. There's one we have to like deal with like the wind, there's one we have to deal with like gas, all these different things. One's platforming, one's weights, and there's not a huge amount of them. But for the most part, they're actually pretty fun, and I think the game, these things when you're not in combat and when you're not during like a very dramatic set piece, game shines amazingly. Very much liked it. One thing as well is I was looking for something to play that was, a lot of games, like I said, have gotten quite big. I would say this game is maybe like 20 hours if you're not doing a lot of the side stuff. So I enjoyed the fact that this game is quite linear and quite structured. Like you do go through certain areas multiple times, and as you're on an island, it all kind of links up. But I really appreciated the fact that it was like, this is like the crypt path. You go down there, you will find stuff, you will unlock stuff for your weapons and things. But the game also lets you come back and backtrack and fast travel between camps as you unlock it, and to get those collectibles, to get more experience, to get more salvage to upgrade weapons. that stuff's always there, but it never feels like it gets in the way. The game is like, no, this is the story we're trying to tell. You have this stuff that you can do in your own time, but if you want to just keep going and keep progressing the story, you can have the game done maybe 20 hours, 25 hours, and I think it just works really well. It feels nice to play something that is a bit more linear like that. I've played a lot of RPGs of late, I've played a lot of games that are bigger. Sometimes it's nice to have a more straightforward game, and I really enjoyed that and appreciate that. I don't know if that's the same in the other two games, which I'll get to at some point. But right now, being able to just play it and go from set piece to set piece in terms of, area to area, I really appreciate that. I think it did a good job of that and moving that along. The story itself is also quite decent. One thing I did enjoy was, like, finding out, this group of people crash landing onto this island, finding out what's going on. There's always an element of supernatural stuff that goes on with the Tomb Raider games, and they keep that here. You've got this cult of people that are like stuck on this island, that want to get off this island. One of the people you're traveling with is maybe a descendant of this particular god that's apparently trapping people here, and you get to see that, and that story unwinds and it's for what it is. Like, it's pretty decent. It feels very much like a sort of movie in that sense. The story's very over the top and whatnot, but it does a good job of, and on top of that, when you find like the documents that people have left behind, it all kind of adds up. They do a really good job of building up the lore of what happened on this island, about the queen that was there, about different parties during World War I, World War II, the people that are trapped there currently. There's all this lore and story and stuff, so you've got like the main lot, but you can find so much more stuff around. It's really cool. So I think they did a good job of combining all of the elements of the story into different parts of the gameplay and coming together, because the actual like traversing the island as well has its own like sort of story to it, like, oh, we've got to get here, but this place is breaking down, there's crazy storms, and you can kind of see stuff unfolding around you while you're also doing it. So I really enjoyed that. I'm not saying it's like the best story ever, but I think it's decent enough for what the game is to enjoy that as part of the experience. Combat in this game was pretty good. It's not amazing. It was at a time when there was a lot of third-person cover shooters, but the game gives you access to a bow, a pistol, a shotgun, a machine gun. I think that's everything. But what's cool about it is that the bow itself is probably the most useful weapon, because you later on you can fire fire arrows, you can fire rope arrows, you can fire grenade arrows off of it. You can do a lot of things with it, and the bow opens up a lot of those opportunities. You can upgrade the bow as you go along. Same with all the guns. Like, I love silenced pistols, so I was running around with that quite a lot of the time. The shotgun's pretty nuts. It has its use. Like, all the guns kind of have a use, because the shotgun can blow open these certain like extra pathways and things. The machine gun gets a grenade launcher attached to it eventually, and you can use that to blow open certain parts. And they do a good job with the combat. The weapon, there's a decent variety there. You've also got this like climbing axe that you can use as a melee weapon, and you can counter enemies and things. So I think it does a really good job of giving you options. You can choose what you want to upgrade. You get upgrades that are like based on like making it easier to kill people with the pistol, headshots, scopes. You've got stuff that allows you to survive longer, counter enemies, attacks, stuff that you can get around on as well. So the game does a good job of giving you combat's worth doing, because you then get more XP that you can use to buy like upgrades, as well as like doing other things in the world. But the one thing is, it doesn't feel amazing, the combat. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not the best part of the game. Like, it's passable, it's enjoyable, but it does feel a little bit like, just sometimes the enemies are just an absolute pain. With like, they chuck a lot of grenades and things, but they can chuck it from so far away, and that can just sort of lead to some issues and stuff, and it can be a little bit annoying. But for the most part, like, it worked decently. There's a good bit of combat with guys with shields, where you have to kind of like dodge out of the way and then shoot them and things. So I liked it. It was decent enough. And then sort of part of that is this Metroidvania style. It kind of to do with the backtracking, but as you go around the world, you collect parts that you can upgrade the weapons. So if you end up finding like bow upgrades and pistol upgrades and stuff, and you're like, oh, I've missed some things, you can go back, you can get those, and then you're allowed to like upgrade those weapons. And the same with the bow. Like, when you get like fire arrows, when you get the rope arrows, when you get the rope extender and stuff, you can kind of Metroidvania way back to areas you've been to before, and it makes it a lot easier to traverse. It makes it easier to access everything that you might not have been able to get before. But it never does it in a way that, like I said before, it's not in a way that it gets in the way of your gameplay and the linearity of the story and things. It's just an extra option that's there that you can have if you want it. But not everything is hunky-dory. There are a couple of weird things about this game that I didn't like. Starting with the QTEs. Now, the QTEs are, you have a circle. That circle goes between another, so there's like the big circle, a little circle, and you have to push the button when it's between both. The game, I found, the prompt at the screen tells you what button to push. But I found the writing was a bit small, and it wasn't next to the QTE. So there were some times when I would just flat out fail the QTEs because they're very quick. And this led to a lot of frustration because I was like, well, if you want me to push a certain button, put the button prompt next to the QTE, under it, above it, like not at the bottom of the screen, because that's not where I'm looking. And I ended up failing a lot of them, quite a lot. Very early on, I was stuck on one where I was like, well, I don't really understand what I've got to do here, because the actual circle doesn't tell you which button to push. It's not like it says, like, for me, it was melee. It doesn't say, like, F in the middle. So, I push F. It was like, no, the prompt's at the bottom of the screen, and the QTE's, like, halfway up the screen. I'm not looking at both. I think the game did a really bad job of trying to describe what you should be, what button you should be pushing for the QTEs. And they are definitely one of the worst parts of the game. Like, they act as part of the set pieces, but they happen too quickly, I think. And the game never really stops to tell you how to do them. There's no like tutorial like the first one where it like stops time and it's like, this is how you do the thing or anything. So playing this on console might be a lot easier. Maybe the button prompts are bigger, but I definitely struggled, and the button prompts for which button to press were never that obvious, and they were always at the bottom of the screen. So a lot of the time I'm thinking, oh, I've got to push F. No, this time I needed to push E, which is grab. So I failed it, and I'm like, for God's sake, like, this is really like annoying. It's not like a game-breaking thing, it's not clear enough for what the game wants you to do. Part of that is also the set pieces in this game. What do I mean by set pieces? Like, there's parts where like Lara's kind of like running, like being brushed along down like a river, and you have to shoot things with a shotgun and then avoid like spikes and stuff. And there might be other ones where you're like running along like while the building's collapsing around you, and you have to like jump at the right time. These are a cool idea, but the river one, for example, I kept getting impaled on spikes because there was never enough time to react. You know, I had to like essentially just guess, and that's how I got through it. But I was like, how am I hitting these things? Like, that felt very unfair. Like, I was like, well, I'm not sure what the obvious, why I'm getting hit by these things. Like, what's the obvious path here? And so I just had to fuck around and just hope for the best, and eventually did it. And then with some of the ones we have to like run along while the building's dropping down, like sometimes it just wouldn't, it just jump but not like be like or fall off or something. Like it would, the action of like jumping to the next platform didn't always like correspond to what was going on screen. So like I would jump. I had this as well, like near the end I would jump to go grab this pillar. I did it the first time and then I died on the next section. I did it the second time and she just missed completely, and I was like, there's a little bit of inconsistency with some of the stuff that's going on in these set pieces where they don't always feel super clear, and that was kind of frustrating as well, because I was like, well, it doesn't feel like it's my fault because the game, it's changing up its rules like on the fly, whether I grab this, whether I don't. And then with the one with the water rapids, it was like it just wasn't very clear as to what I was doing. Like it wasn't like, oh, you need to move this way, then you need to move this way. It was like, oh, just pick a path and hope for the best, and then it just wasn't working. So I was like, I don't really understand why this is the way it is, but definitely that was the game at its lowest point. The QTEs and some of the set pieces, cool ideas, just not executed that well, I would say. There's also like smaller things that didn't really affect the gameplay too much. It was just more annoyances. Sometimes Lara wouldn't always grab the ropes, so when you fire a rope arrow and you can come over to a rope bridge, you could just jump, and sometimes like normally you would get close enough, a little symbol would appear, you push it, she'd automatically grab the rope. But you can grab the ropes from like falling down from above and just grabbing them. Just inconsistent, she just wouldn't always do it. And so I would die in some random spots because I'm like, well, why haven't you grabbed the rope? Like, there was one point I got killed in the cutscene. I'm fighting some dudes. He chucked over some grenades, and it shows you this guy that it suddenly goes, says something, goes to the guy. I've lost control at this point. He comes sliding over. I get blown up in the cutscene. I'm like, well, not really much I could do about that game. Like, and that's the thing is, even when you're doing melee kills and stealth kills and stuff on people, when you lose control of like being able to move, you can still take damage. And like even when you do the death animations, which there is that's a big no-no. Like I shouldn't be punished for doing something the game's telling me to do. It's like, oh, this guy's ready, you can do like a insta death on him, and then someone hits you from behind. Well, now I've just taken damage, but there's nothing I can do about it. I don't know why the game lets that happen, but it does. But again, that was very few and far between. And then really the last thing is there's not really any boss fights in this game. Like, even the ending part, where you see the double pistols, where you finally see her use the double pistols, the classic. You just shoot the guy in slow-mo, and that's it. There's no boss fights, which I don't think I would want lots of boss fights, but I think at least one would have been good. I don't know if they're going for like a realism thing, but then having said that, this game's full of supernatural stuff, so... But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. It would have been nice to like either have one or two boss fights, because even one of the other characters you see in the game, she just straight up just shoots through the head and dies in the cutscene. So it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was a little disappointing, but it wasn't the end of the world. The game probably didn't need boss fights, but you'd expect to at least have like one or two or something along those lines. But yeah, it was not the case. All in all, I actually really enjoyed it, despite my issues with the QTEs and the set pieces and stuff, and some of the odd things happening. I actually enjoyed the game. I think sometimes it's nice to play a game that's a little bit on the short side. I think 20 hours to 25 hours, or even 30 hours is a nice pace for some games, in a time when a lot of games are open world or live service and stuff like that now. Going back and playing something like this, I was like, oh, I can appreciate this for what it is. And I knew that going in that it wasn't going to be super long or anything like that, so... I've had a good time. Is this the sort of thing you should play sort of 2024? I think so. I think the game still holds up pretty well. I think that if you're looking for something that is a very contained story and something that's got a lot of fun traversal, and if you like Uncharted, I think you'll love this. I'm curious to see what the next two games are like, because I'm probably going to dive into playing them fairly soon. But I think as of right now, if this is something that you would enjoy, or if you like platforming, if you like decent third-person combat, if you like stories and finding collectibles and stuff, I think this is really good. This game could probably be like 40 hours if you do everything, but I think you're probably going to hit the story in 20-25 hours, and then maybe spend another 5 hours grabbing things, if you know what you're doing. So it's not a long game, it's not a massive time investment, but you can probably get it on the cheap. I've got it on PC, you can get it on console probably quite cheap. And I think I would recommend it. I think if this is a game that has passed you by like it did me, check it out, give it a go, see what you think. It's not perfect, but I think it's fun enough for a lot of people that they would enjoy it. So there you go, that's sort of my recommendation of Tomb Raider 2013. Go play it if you can get it on the cheap, worth it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.